Welcome to the Leadership Development Armory Lesson 8. Today we'll be hearing from Jackie Raihl, our Salvation Army Orange representative, about partnering with parents in youth ministry. Please be mindful that because this was recorded on Zoom, the quality of the audio and visuals isn't great, but the quality of the content is exceptional. We hope that this lesson is of value to your ministry. Please enjoy.
So today we're really excited to hear from our guest, who is Jackie Raihl. Jackie grew up in the Salvation Army as an officer's kid, which makes her feel like she's been in ministry her whole life. And she's been a local leader for many youth programs, studied elementary education for her bachelor's degree, and worked in the Southern California department, the youth department, as a youth program specialist for over 7 years. And during that time, she earned her master's in Christian studies with an emphasis in youth ministry from Grand Canyon University. And after years of planning youth councils, say rallies, and grading corporate lessons, she was able to join the Orange team as a Salvation Army partner in order to help them understand the Salvation Army, but also to help the Salvation Army learn about the Orange strategy. And this strategy focuses on combining the influence of the home and the church in a child's life in order to give them the best chance and guidance on how to have a relationship with God. So we're really excited to hear from Jackie about partnering with parents today. But first, we'll begin with prayer. So Harriet, if you're willing to open us up in prayer.
Of course. Let's pray. Dear God, we love you so much, and we're so grateful for the people that you put in our lives, Lord, to lead us and direct us towards you. Lord, I pray that as Jackie gives us some resources this afternoon, that you will just keep them in our mind, Lord. May they spark something in us. That way we can walk away with more tools to use, Lord, because all of this just really means bringing more people into your kingdom and knowing your love and your grace and your mercy, Lord. We love you so much. In your name we pray. Amen.
All right, I guess I get to take it away. Just as Summer lovingly said, my name is Jackie. Really, to make it easy, I am one of you. I know most of you. It's so nice to see you all. And I'm so happy that I get to talk about this topic because it is one of my favorites, and it's something that I am incredibly passionate about. And that is, how do we as the church connect to the home life of a child? During our research, we've kind of figured out that parents have about 3,000 hours with their kids. The church has 40. So if we're not partnering with the home in any way that we can, we're missing out on such a degree of impact that we could have on a family's home life. And just to get a few caveats out of the way, when I say parents, parents is a general term. I do not just mean mom and dad. A parent can be a grandparent, a foster parent. Growing up in the Salvation Army, I'm not 100% sure who I'm actually related to. I called everyone aunt and uncle. Same when I say parent. Whoever is involved in the life of a child to any sort of degree, that's who we're talking about here when we say parent. Same when we say families. We never want to define what a family is, because a family can be so many different things in this generation. And we don't want any parent or any family to feel like they have to fit a certain mold to fit into our church. Absolutely not. We want all families of all kinds to feel welcome in our home. And that means we also have to be really careful about our vocabulary when we say parents. Sometimes it's overemphasizing to the people in our congregations. When we say parents, we mean everyone. When we say families, we mean everyone. Because those words can be used to kind of fit an ideal that, to be absolutely honest, does not exist. So we don't want families to feel like they're not represented, that we don't see them. So we want to be careful with that language. But I'm just going to generally use parents, and just know when I say that, I'm meaning that to be inclusive of just about everybody. Another big thing is to be really careful about generalizations, because we all know outliers. We might hear anecdotally about something, or we might hear a statistic and instantly are in our head say, but that's not this person, and that's not that person. Absolutely, you're absolutely correct. Families are outliers. We're all outliers, to be absolutely honest. General statements fit very few, but they're good things to keep in mind. Stats are actually there to help us, to give us a main idea, but they don't tell the whole story. So it's important to look at what the statistics are telling us, look at that information, kind of keep the grain of salt, meaning that it's not perfect. There are still going to be some outliers, but at least it's going to give us a place to go. So at Orange, everything that we do, everything that we provide is trying to circle back to how do we make this lesson applicable to the home? How do we invite the parents of the kids in our congregations into the conversation? Not necessarily into our church. Sometimes that's out of our hands, that's out of our hearts. But the first step is how do we include them in conversations that we're having with them about their faith as our kids? So I'm going to open this up with one general question, and it always brings about some caveats and it always brings about a little bit of struggle, but it is my favorite question. And that is, what would change in your ministry if you believed that every parent wants to be a good parent? I want that to sink in for a little bit. Don't just quickly answer that question, but really think about that. What would change in your ministry? And I would go so far as to say, and in your heart, if you believed that every parent could be a good parent. And there's kind of two sides to that. I got a little bit of pushback in a division when I said this, because an officer came up and he said, well, I don't want to tell a bad parent that they're a good parent. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that every parent is a good parent, but what could change in the life of a parent if they believed that you believed they could be better? How would you, as a ministry leader, how would your tone change? How would the conversations with that parent change? How would your interactions with those families change if you believed every parent could be a good parent? And on the flip side of that, how would a parent feel receiving that, knowing that my ministry leader has this unerring faith that we could be better? Not necessarily that we will be better, but that there's a possibility of becoming a better parent. Sometimes in our ministries, just anecdotally, we have that one parent who we really struggled with, who we know was not present in the life of a child, and that can sometimes taint our thoughts about all parents. So we have to be really careful with those outliers, not causing impacts on the generalization of families, not letting those certain situations kind of taint our ideas about parents. Parenting is hard. We know this. I'm not even a parent, and I know that. Parenting is one of the most difficult jobs that anyone can have. But what could change? What generational trauma could we interrupt by truly believing that every parent can be a good parent? It's kind of where I want to start with, because it starts with our attitude more than anything. Partnering with parents, engaging with parents does not necessarily mean more programs, does not necessarily mean adding something additional to your core calendar that are already overfilled, but it's really what can change in our attitudes and in our hearts and in our congregations to show parents that we are for them. Not meaning that we are against the child in any way, but showing parents that we are for them, that we support them and that we love them and that we want to really engage with them. So something that we did at Orange is we're always wanting to know how we can support parents better. That is a heart that we have. That is something we really want to push for. So we actually commissioned a study with Arbor Research to find out what parents were wanting from the church. Not only Christian families, but secular parents. What are they wanting from the church? What are they wanting for their kids? Interestingly enough, we commissioned the study for December 2020 to March 2022. And if you are recognizing those dates, you'll realize that parenting was a little rough in those situations, that it was a very interesting time to really commission a study about parenting. So the information we have is raw. The answers that we got are definitely an outpouring of parents who are on the brink, parents who are struggling, parents who are just trying to figure out what the next day is going to look like. And that really actually can be seen in the data that we received. And we put it all together in a book called What Most Parents Aren't Telling You. This is something that if you are interested in, please connect with me. I'm going to be more than happy to send this on to you. Don't tell Orange, but I'm more than happy to pass this on. And something that I love is in the Army, we have a lot of anecdotal stories, hearing about how someone picked us up from in a church van and brought us to church, and that's how we got there. Or hearing how Sunday sunbeams kind of saved our lives. We have those anecdotal stories, but I'm on the flip side, I love statistics, because statistics tells us the stories that we don't always get to hear. It's the stories that people aren't always telling us. They might not feel comfortable to give their own kind of face to a story, but in an anonymous survey, they tend to be really honest and raw. And so I love getting statistics to find out where are parents at, what are they asking the church for, and what do they want from us? Because we can't really partner with them if we don't know what we're doing, if we don't know what we want, and we don't know what the outcomes are going to be. So looking at these stats is actually really helpful just to give us a baseline of where parents are starting and what they're asking us for. So this book is split into a couple of parts, about 4 to 5 sections, and I'm just going to talk about each section, and then we can kind of discuss a little bit more in depth about what that means for our ministry and how our ministry can respond to what parents are saying. And the first section that we are going to deep dive in is what parents want, what parents are asking for, what do they need? And an interesting stat that I love is 62.7% of parents, both Christian and secular parents, are saying they are looking for things to do together as a family. They want experiences as a family. What a great thing for the church to come together and bring to parents. And what it's not saying is they're looking for a program to attend together. I think that's something really important that we have to kind of put our finger on the pulse on. It's not necessarily a program, they're asking for an experience. Something that's actually happening in your own territory is, I don't know which core that, because I cannot remember, but Shelby and Brian Qualls just did a family game night at their core. What a great way to bring families together to do something fun, but not putting a program on you, not asking for you to dictate everything, to fill out a huge agenda, but just providing a safe space. Thank you, Ketchikan Core. But for providing a safe space for parents to come and just have fun with their kids. Maybe it's you putting out a little bit of food. Please bring coffee for the parents. They absolutely need it. But a great, easy way, put some games on the table and say, families, this is your space. This is your time. Another thing I loved is the core put together a family scavenger hunt for them to do. They did 2, one for them to find things around the house and one for them to do around their own city. So if parents didn't have money for transportation, they did not have, funds to go out and do something like that, they were still able to have a family experience together. But also if they were able to be more mobile and be able to go out into their city, it was a fun thing for them to do together. Now you can turn that into a program if you want. I'm not saying programs are bad, but just be mindful of family schedules. One thing that's really important is to define the win for your ministry of what parents and families are doing. You have to define what is a win for you and what you can control. If you say the win is attendance, though, that is out of your hands. You cannot control traffic, you cannot control health, you cannot control work schedules. So a program isn't necessarily a failure if people don't show up. It could be tons of variables that didn't happen, but the win can be providing those opportunities for families. When we define that as the win and put that in something in our control, we actually can decide what works for us and what doesn't work for us. And the best thing is, try again. If something doesn't work, that's okay. That is not a failure. That just means it didn't work this time around. Something that really worked during the pandemic was creating little ministry boxes for families of just putting a few activities together. A core reached out and said, man, I was over at a family's house and they still had that box in the corner unopened. And I told them the win is that they have the box. You don't know what rainy day in the next few months is going to happen where a parent at the end of their rope is going to remember, I have that box. That's the win. The win was providing that resource, not necessarily the parents using it when you wanted them to. Because we never know family schedules. We never know, especially when there's custody issues of who's with dad or mom in 1 week. So we can't always say when a kid or when a family is going to do something together. So when we define the win and place it on a specific date, we're kind of doing a disservice to ourselves. But the win is just providing those opportunities. Another thing that parents are saying that they want, both secular and Christian, was character development in their children. They're worried about who their kids are becoming. They want to know how they're going to grow up and be functional adults in society and have these positive character attributes. And that's something the church can definitely align with. A lot of these character attributes are characteristics of God. They align together. So the virtues that they're learning in the Orange curriculum itself They are perfectly aligned with attributes of God in scripture, and they are character development themselves. So we are responding to parents who are saying we want to figure out how to make our kids the best that they can be. It's learning those attributes of God and how they're living those attributes out in their everyday faith. The last thing that parents are really, really looking for is access to resources. They want to know. They want to know everything, and they want anything that can help them to be successful as parents. And as a church, this could be a little bit tricky because, as we all know, resources can get a little bit expensive. We all want to have all the education books. We want to have all the top of the line research that's coming out. That's not always feasible. Something that we try to do in the curriculum to make it a little bit easier for you is parent cue. Those parent cues are helping parents learn what their kids learned in Sunday school and how they can apply that to their everyday faith at home. And gives little parents things that they can say and do throughout the week to reinforce that lesson. So I'm going to share what that parent cue looks like real quick. So this is the parent cue that's printed in the lesson itself. Let me click out of that. So this is just the elementary version. I pulled it because I think it's the prettiest. And also this is for April and it's community garden and I love plants. So of course I immediately gravitated to this one. So this easy printout to help resource our parents tells your parent what Bible story the child went over, what kind of virtue of God, what aspect of God are they learning about. For this month, it happens to be humility, gives them the memory verse that they learned that Sunday. And my favorite thing is it helps engage the parent in the lesson by giving them things to do at morning time, mealtime, bedtime, and when they're driving in the car, how to reinforce that lesson. These are great resources that parents themselves are specifically asking for. How can I be more involved? And I know what you're thinking, Jackie, this beautiful printout is going to be on my core van and never make it into the home. You're not wrong. You are absolutely right. Handouts hardly make it home. And that is why we have created the Parent Cue app. So everything that you're seeing is actually on an app itself. I happen to have my own app, creepily, so sorry, Harriet, but it has Colin on it. I have Colin, Addison, and no baby. Just to early warn people, I do not have a baby. So I have no baby, but it gives the same information on an app for parents. So they can see those same mealtime, bedtime, drive times right in real time on their phone. And my favorite thing that it does is actually links to the Parent Cue blog, which gives blog posts about things that kids are going through in their lives and what parents can do to reach them during those times and phases of their lives. So a lot of times parents will come to you and say, hey, my child is struggling with this. And we all just freeze because that's such a big topic. There's so many resources. Where do we start? ParentCue.org gives resources on a ton of issues. You can also reach out to me and I'm more than happy to comb through those resources and pass them right on to you. Thank you, Harriet, for showing your phone for your own Parent Cue app. But these are just kind of easy things that we can give to families to resource them, to make sure that they have what they need to really dive deep into the spiritual life of their kids. So something that they're specifically asking for. Does anybody have any questions, comments before I jump right on to the next one? I know I have a ton of information. I'm trying to fit it into this hour. So if I go over, I'm so sorry. All right, we're gonna jump right next. This is kind of a hard one. What do parents fear? This is pretty big. The top things that parents are saying that they're most concerned about with their kids is anxiety, depression, nutrition, sleep, and exhaustion. Huge issues in the world today. Something that if you have a middle schooler, elementary, high schooler, toddler, baby, you know, all of these are issues that our kids are really struggling with today. And it's something that parents are highlighting as this is something that they feel like they can't quite grasp. This is something that they feel like they're a little bit out of control and want more help with. Us as the church, sometimes, oh yes, I can absolutely say those. Anxiety, depression, nutrition, sleep, and exhaustion. I think it's very interesting that sleep and exhaustion were two separate lines because it's lack of sleep and exhaustion are two very different things. This is just what parents are struggling with. And us as the church, Sometimes the best thing that we can do is to direct them to a Christian counselor. We do not have to have all the answers, nor should we have all the answers. If we have not dedicated our education to these topics, pass them along to the experts with love and respect. That is the best thing that we can do. But knowing that these are issues, knowing that this is what parents are concerned about, this kind of helps guide our core calendars. If we already know kids are exhausted, maybe we need to rework what we're doing with our kids' programs. Maybe it's even factoring in, how do we teach them how to rest? How do we teach them how to kind of empty their mind? How do we help them figure out how to sleep a little bit better at night, get those good routines down? That Sunday school badge that gets you down those bedtime routines, I still remember that from when I was younger. These are kind of skill sets that kids need to learn and that parents are struggling to teach to their kids. So this is a great place for the church to align with parents and say, hey, we know that this is a struggle. This is what we're going to do to try to resource you and your child and work together on this issue. Because again, it's all about that partnership aspect. Another big fear that parents have had that the pandemic has really kind of highlighted is they feel like they're not enough for their kids. During the pandemic, parents were the educator, the nutritionist, the gym teacher, the spiritual life director. They were everything to their kids at all times. And if we look at the blog posts that were out, the news articles that were out, all the world was telling parents was that they were failing at something. They weren't doing enough to help their kids at school. They weren't doing enough to get their kids more exercise. They weren't doing enough to get the kids nutrition that they need. What we want to make sure is that the church is not one more place that parents feel like they're failing. Because if we're not careful, that's something that we could come across to them. If we always have our language saying, parents, you should be doing this, what a lot of parents are hearing is, you are not doing this. And it's just one other place that's telling them that they're not measuring up, that they're not being the parent that they need to be. What we can do on the flip side of that is be never-ending cheerleaders to our parents. Always being a voice of encouragement, always being that little voice in the back of their head saying, yes, you can, yes, you will, we are here to help. That again does not mean another program. That does not mean, oh, we need to throw up and do some more parenting classes. Those are great. Those are great things. But if that's only what we're doing, we're kind of missing that relationship connection point. We're just giving them a program and not a person. Something that we like to say here at Orange is resources without relationship is just spam. If you are just throwing resources out there, but you don't have any sort of relationship with that parent, that's just spam hitting them over their heads in an already overworked parent. It's just spam to them at that point. If we don't have the relationship first, we can't speak life into that family. Relationship has to come first. Relationships take time and effort. They are not easy. They do not happen right away, and they are going to be difficult. I don't think I've ever heard of a relationship that has been smooth sailing 100% of the time. Relationships are sticky and awkward, and they become a little bit of a mess. But that's what God calls us to do. God calls us to be in relationship with everyone, to be that never-ending support. If you don't know a parent, then you can't really speak into their life. If you can't let a parent know that you know what they're going through, they're not really going to listen when you tell them what they should be doing. They're going to say, you don't know me. You don't know my kid, which is a huge point. You don't know what I'm going through, and you don't know my struggles. So as much as we might be having these great resources to give, if we're just spamming them and not having the relationship, we're missing out on those hours of influence, and we're missing out on that relationship that we need to be having. Building relationships is incredibly difficult. I say this story all the time, but I had a ministry leader tell me that they built this great parent resource wall with all these books and handouts, and they were so frustrated that a parent was just sitting in the parking lot and not going to her resource wall. And all I could think was, go to the car. The parent did the hard thing. They got to your parking lot. They made the effort. We got to leave our building and go to them if that's what it takes. All we need to do is just walk right over to the car, knock on the door, and say hi. They might not roll down the window. They might be a little concerned about why you're coming to the car, but relationships take time. If they've already made the effort to come to your building, we got to give that effort back. We have to meet them halfway. There are so many church hurts. There are so many people who are nervous about what the church is going to say and do for them, that they might feel that you're a little bit more of a threat than a friend. So we have to show through our relationship with them that we do want to support and love them. And that does take time. That takes more than words. That takes actions and effort. You know, maybe that parent will never leave their car. Maybe you bring them a coffee. And maybe the next time they come, you remember their coffee order. And maybe a few weeks after that, you find out her name. And slowly but surely, you can build that relationship. But if the expectation is for her to leave the car, that's not really within your control. What you can do is make sure that you get to know that parent to the best of your ability. We all know in our churches, we have those parents who never come in our building. That doesn't mean we can't build a relationship with them. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of knocking on doors that don't open. It takes a lot of unanswered text messages, unanswered calls. Just because it's hard does not mean that it's not worth the effort. But there will always be those parents that we never connect with, that no matter what we do, we don't get to build that relationship. That's okay, as long as we're putting in the effort. And as long as that doesn't affect the next time we meet a parent and say, well, because this one didn't want to meet with me, this one won't either. We can't put those generalizations onto our parents. We have to keep trying. And sometimes, officers, it's not you. You should not be the person. My favorite thing to say to a Corps officer is, yes, there is work to be done. It does not always have to be done by you. Let that sink in. There is always work to be done. It does not have to be done by you. Same with our cute little ministry leaders. There is always work to be done. It does not always have to be done by you. If you had a very enthusiastic mom in your congregation, maybe she's in charge of making the coffee and making those introductions. If you have a single dad who's just really trying to make friends, maybe that's the person that you say, hey, maybe you can connect with a couple of other dads and really meet together and see, you know, if you can build relationships there. It does not always have to be you. It does not always have to be formal. If you do a youth night and you know those parents are not going to your Bible study that you've put in hours of effort, but they're just sitting in the hallway, put a coffee cart in the hall. Maybe put a coffee cart, and after a while, maybe put conversation cards on there and see if you can spark conversation where they can talk to one another. It's these little points of engagement of us never stopping, always trying something new that's going to help show parents that we're pursuing a relationship with them, that we want this relationship without agenda, but we just want to show love. I know that one was really hard. I know anecdotally, we probably all have this parent in our head being like, nope, they're never going to talk to me. That's okay. Give them grace and move on from that. There's always going to be the great white whale of a parent that we can't never seem to reach. It's going to happen. Just don't let that affect your relationship with every other parent and every other guardian that you have contact with. Now we're going to move on to one of our next sections called How Parents Feel. This one was very, very interesting, especially when it came to the differences between moms and dads. Moms feel more alone than dads do. 78% of moms said they feel alone in their parenting. 20% of dads said they felt alone in their parenting. That feels pretty real. That feels like a pretty real statistic. Almost 80% of moms say that they feel alone. So what can we do to help those moms feel a little bit less alone? Again, it might not be a program. It might be a card in the mail. It might be an easy, my favorite thing to do is send Starbucks gift cards. Quickest thing you can do to get the best possible return and say, hey, here's a gift card. I'd love to meet you for coffee, but if you can't make it, I wanted to treat you anyway. Say, hey, man, you're parenting a fifth grader, so am I. It's rough, isn't it? Go take your break today. I know what you're going through. Helping moms feel a little bit more free, have them feel a little bit more seen is so helpful, especially when parenting feels so isolating. Even just saying me too, what a huge thing. You're not solving their problem. You're not figuring out parenting for them, but you're helping them feel a little less alone. Another statistic that I found really interesting was low-income families feel higher levels of feeling alone, distant, and judged. This is a huge one, and something I think that we need to consider being a church and an area for social services. We have parents who come for our social services who will struggle coming to our churches because we know their situation. You have seen them at their lowest point, and that feels very vulnerable. That's really difficult to see a person on a Tuesday and pick up that food box and then see them on a Sunday and know that they know you couldn't get food that week, that you didn't have enough for your kids that week. That's a really big struggle for parents, and something I think we don't always highlight and don't always understand why these people that we're helping aren't coming to our churches on Sunday. That's really difficult. It's a really hard stigma to overcome. And that's a really hard stigma that we don't always have control over. We can be as kind as possible. We can try to make it as anonymous as possible, but that family is still going to know that this person knows my situation in a way that I didn't really want to tell them. They didn't really have a choice. They needed that food box, so they had to be a little bit vulnerable. That kind of took that agency away from them, and they didn't have the choice to meet you on their terms. That's going to be something that, again, that relationship building is going to be really imperative, but it also might be partnering with another core near you saying, hey, if you don't feel comfortable going here, this core officer over here is amazing. They're going to reach out and connect with you. That doesn't mean you're losing out on a potential core member. It means you're kingdom building and sending them to a core where they might feel a little bit more comfortable because they're not having to advertise their certain situation. Another thing that's really interesting is Christian parents did feel a higher level of feeling supported by the church. So that should be something that's really encouraging for us as ministry leaders. Christian families do feel like they're being supported by the church. On the flip side of that, non-Christian parents feel very judged by the church, feel like it's a difficult place to go to for services. Because of that, there's a little bit of a disconnect where we want to reach out to those families of non-believers, but the non-believers do not trust where we're coming from. They don't trust our agenda. They don't trust that what we're doing is out of love and not out of manipulation. Again, that's where relationship is vital. I struggle with this one because I've seen the church hurt quite a few families, and I've seen quite a few families not be very kind to their churches. It's not always the easiest of relationships. It's always going to be a little bit of a struggle, but we have to show families that we are for them no matter who they are. That's what we're as the church called to do. We're not called to give caveats on we're only going to help to this degree until you become a member of our church and accept Jesus, and then you get a little bit more help. That's not what we're called to do. We're called to love and support families so that they feel safe enough, supported enough, loved enough, that we show them Jesus enough that they make that decision on their own. But already there's a stigma that the church is trying to get something from them. And that's something we have to overcome. We've kind of built that ourselves a little bit. We leaned into that a little too far, and now we have to overcome that. Now we have to show families that we love them, support them, no matter where they're coming from, no matter what they've done in their past lives, that we are still wanting to help them become better parents and bring them to a relationship with Christ. But that relationship takes time. And those, we're not going to get those spontaneous moments of coming to the altar unless we're willing to put in the effort and the love and really get in deep with those families and show them that they can trust us. But for that to happen, we have to be trustworthy. Again, trustworthiness takes time. These aren't relationships that are going to happen right away. It's going to be a lot of kingdom building on your part and a lot of being vulnerable as a ministry leader. It's going to be a lot of broken hearts for you of putting your heart out on the line and some people not reciprocating. But again, that's what Jesus calls us to do. And in the last really big section that we're going to go over is, where are parents going for help? When parents know that they're a little bit in over their head, where do they turn to when they're needing that assistance? 80% of parents, the first place they go to is for their spouse. Not hard to figure out, not a hard statistic to think about. Of course, they're going to lean on their partner in marriage or their partner in relationship to really help them through their parenting crisis. What that does do to help us is if we do have one parent who's a believer and what is not, we still have that influence in that family. It's not always, we have to have the whole family come to our church. Sometimes it might just be that mom. or sometimes it might just be that dad or that grandma or that aunt that we can really invest in and send them back to their family almost as like a missionary to their own family, to tell them what they're learning and to hopefully bring them into that relationship that can go towards a relationship with the church and with Christ. Parents also go to extended family. Again, those grandparents, aunt, uncles, we can't discount the family itself. Family dynamics are insane no matter what family you're in. It's always going to be a little weird and a little bit sticky. For me, that's fun. For others, it's a little chaotic. I get it. But that doesn't mean that God can't use these extended family relationships to really bring one another into the kingdom. So feel free, if we see this single person in the church and we feel like they can't necessarily be a resource for parents, we don't know who they're related to. We don't know what family kind of system that they're a part of. Leaning into every person in our congregation can really widen the influence that we have on our community. That's something that I love about the concept of lead small that we have, is really leaning into a few in your community, because then they can lean into a few, and then they can lean into a few. And all of a sudden, this influence that you just had on a couple of people has extended far beyond the reach that you could have done on your own. So sometimes it's just pouring into a few people, really kind of lifting into that relationship and just seeing where God uses it and seeing where God spreads it. It's not all on you. God doesn't say, hey, you got to get this family in or you failed as a ministry leader. He's saying, hey, I love you. I want you to love this family. Who knows what I'm going to do with it? Who knows how much I'm going to bless what you're doing and extend far beyond what you thought possible. So it's always leaning into those people that you think might be a little bit unexpected of an influence in family, and just seeing how that can have an effect on the people that are around them. And so looking at those areas of where families go, Christian families rate the church as the third kind of option of where they go when they need parenting assistance. Something interesting on the flip side is non-Christian families. That was one of the lowest rated areas of where they would go for assistance to the church. Seems pretty obvious, right? Someplace that you might not trust, that you think has an agenda, you're going to rate that really low. Something that is beneficial for the Army is we do so many social service programs that builds trust into a community. In the Army, we can kind of climb up that ladder of influence and that trust. So while they might not specifically trust us as a church, we trust that they kind of build that trust that we've been helping them as a family through food boxes, that we've been helping them with any legal issues, with rental assistance. That kind of brings us up the ladder on where they turn to for those parenting issues. So don't discount the social services that you do and kind of see it as a separate mission of the Army. It truly is all inclusive, and it truly does work together to build the kingdom. We're meeting those physical needs, not only, meet physical needs to actually meet spiritual needs, but it's building in that trust. It's building in that foundational belief that we as the Salvation Army are for families, and then they can lean in a little bit more to the church side of it. I am actually going to share my screen one more time. And in our book that we wrote about what parents aren't telling you, we did one big research question, and we actually have 39 pages of answers, which I found very interesting. And the question was this: what's something someone could have done for your parent when you were growing up that would have helped them be a better parent? We got over 500 responses to this question, and about 490 of them will break your heart, because it's just the near misses of the church. Because we think that partnering with parents is all about the parent relationship, and kind of forget that kids are seeing what the church is doing for their parents. Kids and teenagers see and understand way more than we give them credit for. They know it and they see it. So they know when we kind of miss the mark with the parent. We know when we've been so blindsided about getting everything done on our stats list that we forget about relationship. This is actually a free resource on Orange Leaders if you ever want to download it, or you can just reach out to me and I'd be more than happy to send it to you. But we kind of broke down these answers into a few sections. And one of the sections that was really heartbreaking is seeing how parents felt so isolated and that kids just wanted them to have a friend. The kids just wanted their parents to have someone that they could turn to. We think kids don't see it. They absolutely do. They absolutely see what their parents are struggling with, and they're powerless to help. And how difficult is it as a child to see your parents struggling, to see that they need help, and to go to a place that says they want to help everyone, and we just kind of miss it. I'm not saying this to guilt you, absolutely not at all. We're human. We're going to miss things. We're not going to see everything. Parents tend to hide things from us as well. Give yourself grace, but also let yourself get this information. Because once we know these stories, we can do a little bit better in our own ministries and say, hey, I remember this in the research question. Parents are saying they feel isolated. How can I be more of a friend to the parents in my ministry? Easy as that. How do you be a friend? You're a ministry leader. You are a core officer. You're a pastor. You also get to be a friend, because you as ministry leaders often have your own kids. You as pastors also usually have your own kids. We're speaking to you just as much as the parents in your ministry. You need a friend. You need resources. You need to know that the church that you have dedicated your life to, is there to support you, not only as you're building the kingdom for them, but as yourself as a parent. So give yourself a little bit of grace. This one is slightly a little bit heartbreaking. I think it's really important for Salvation Army context. If one answer that was given, what is one thing you wish the church did for your parent? And someone from Columbus, Missouri wrote, my dad was a minister. I wish leadership would require my dad to take time off to spend with his family. Sorry. He always put church before family. And we do that a lot in TSA. You do not have to sacrifice your family for other parents. You should not be doing that. Ministry leaders, do not sacrifice your own kids for the other kids in your ministry and for the other parents in your ministry. That is not what God has called you to do. It is not what the Salvation Army has called you to do. We are glorifying busyness and saying that as a ministry leader, we have to be everything to everyone. And that is not true. You cannot be everything to everyone, but you are everything to your kids. They are the number one. This is coming from, I love my parents so much, but my dad almost missed my high school graduation to open up a Salvation Army building, and I will never forget it. He made it. Thank you, Commissioner Swires, for forcing my dad to leave, but he almost missed it for a building. Relationship over building. Relationship over everything. Your kids are going to remember. We kind of see an epidemic of officer kids leaving the Army. Not saying that this is the whole reason, but it is a reason. It is a reason. It's really hard to being a kid in ministry and seeing your parents struggle with some things. There's nothing you can do. So we have to remember, partnering with parents is partnering with one another as well. Especially, we have such a good relationship in the Army with our divisions, with our territories, checking in with one another, not just as ministry leaders, but as parents. How are we supporting each other with parents? Partnering with parents is not just with the people in our community. It's not just with our congregation. It's with our division. It's with our territory. It's with our country as a whole at TSA. How are we partnering with one another to make sure we are being the best parents possible to our kids, and that we are giving our kids the best parents possible? Thank you for going off on that tangent. For me, that was something that I'm very passionate about, as you can tell. It's because I want parents to win. I want parents to know that they're doing a good job. And the world isn't telling them that. The world is only telling them that they're missing out on something. They're not doing something right. Sadly, those mommy blogs that are telling you 101 ways that you have already messed up your child, it's not true. That is absolutely not true. Maybe you have now, but you don't have to anymore. That's something that we can tell parents is the past is the past. We can't change it. We can't fix it. We can only move forward. But if we don't believe parents can move forward, we're keeping them stuck in the past. If we don't believe us as parents, you as parents right now, if you don't believe you can move forward, you're leaving yourself in the past as well. And that's doing a disservice to everyone. So partnering with parents is not just giving them a handout. It's not just giving them a program. It's not just posting something on social media for parents every week and saying, I've done my due diligence of reaching out. It's really just being a human. It's being a human to one another and saying, I might have these red epaulets on, but I'm a parent just like you. And I'm going through the same things that you're going through. Let's support one another. I'm not up here and you're down here. I'm not telling you that, you do X, Y, and Z and automatically you're a good parent. What you are saying is we as the church love you. We as the church support you. And we want to walk alongside you as we go through this life together. And how do we do those things effectively? And how do we do those things in a way that makes sense for our community, that isn't overloading families' already overloaded schedules, but it's just reminding them that they have a teammate, they have a cheerleader on the side who's there for them at all times. So partnering with parents isn't a thing, it's a relationship. And that's something that we all need to remember moving forward. Does anybody have any comments, questions, anecdotal stories? I do love them just as much as I love statistics.
I think oftentimes, because obviously in coming from an education background, we talk a lot about like relationships with kids and how they're never going to learn unless you have that relationship with them. And I think oftentimes we remember that when it comes to kids. We're like, oh, I can like have those conversations with the kids. But the reason why kids do well learning from people that they have a relationship with is because they're human, because every person is like that the way that you respond to kids, even though you may change the strategy ever so slightly, it's about that relationship. It's about the intentionality. Like, people want to be loved, they want to be seen, they want people to be intentional with them. And I think that oftentimes we think that that's very complicated and so heavy, and we're like, how do I do that? But what you'll notice is that when you invest in those relationships, when you invest in those parents, then that's going to ease the pressure on some of those other things, the more specific things where maybe you're not like, maybe your strength isn't like organizational things or coming up with ideas for events. And maybe because you have that relationship with the parents, and this is kind of what we were talking about in our last session with the no budget program ideas, was that maybe then that parent's going to want to jump in. They're going to say, oh, I'm super, like, I love doing this. Like, let me participate in this way. And like, I think that we forget sometimes the value that intentionality and love and the foundation that can build for a strong community that then continues that process. Because unfortunately, with the way the Salvation Army is structured, people leave, people will be gone. If you don't have that foundation of a community and like this group together, where as a whole we have built this foundation, then as soon as the co-officer leaves, that community crumbles. So I just love it. Relationships, intentionality.
And just like almost feel better to know there is no magic button that you're missing out on. There is not like one perfect program that if you do, every partner, every parent in your community is going to partner with you. There is not like one Bible study that you do that is going to change everything. There is no magic bullet in ministry. It's a lot of little wins. There's never going to be one overarching. That one overarching is Jesus Christ, and we can't control. He does what he wants, and that's good. That knows like we're not missing something. There's not something out of our reach, out of our budgets, that if we just did this, everything would change and be different. Because as soon as we did that one thing, ministry is going to move in a different direction, or parents going to move in a different direction, and then it's going to be, oh, but if I do this, then everything is going to be changing again. It's not true, and don't fall for it. Don't fall for these things that say like, get this and everything is going to change. It's just like what I say about curriculum. Curriculum is a car with no engine. It looks pretty. It's beautiful, but it's not going to get you where you want to go. Strategy is what's going to get you where you want to go. So just like a program is a car with no engine. It looks pretty. It looks nice in your parking lot, but unless you do something with it, unless you give it an engine, it's not going to take you where you want it to go. And in that instance, relationships are your engine. Anyone else? These beautiful blank screens. Does anyone want to jump in?
No, I was going to say, one time when I was just driving some of the kids to our program, one of the kids said something like, our parents just don't get it. And at first I was kind of wondering, I said, what do they not get? But in my heart, I was thinking they don't get why I'm not getting off my video game right away, because they don't get it, when they ask me to take out their trash or whatever. But I said, what do they not get? Like, if you could tell them, what would it be? And they said, that we see the troubles they're having, and we know, and we feel it too, but there's nothing we can do about it. So when you said that, I was like, oh yeah. Like
these answers are just heartbreaking, of kids who knew that their parents couldn't make rent, but there was nothing they could do to help, who they knew their parents were struggling with depression, and they wanted to do everything they could to take that load off, but it didn't fix the situation. And if we want to be the best for the kids in our ministry, which I hate saying is the future of church, they're your current congregation. If we want to say we're for kids, we have to be for parents. Yeah. We have to be for the family around them, because the kids see that. They see what that is. And if we want the kids to trust us, we have to show them that we care about what they care about. They care about their families. Yeah. What an easy one for us to care about them too.
I thought it was a really powerful question. Like, how would you want the church or your youth worker to have helped your parents? Like, wow. Because it's not big, usually. It's like, can you check in on my mom because I can't help her?
Yeah.
Like, wow.
But
Powerful.
like, what a good helpful kind of response for us to know that it's the little things. It's not the big things. It's not the budget things. It's the little personal check-ins that do emotionally drain us. Please don't hear that these are easy things to do. They are emotionally draining, but they're little things that we can do, that we can say, I have 15 minutes today to check in with a parent. I might not have 15 minutes to download my curriculum. You do, but you might not. But you have 15 minutes to call, to text. If you're only sending emails, a good open email rate is 20%. So you're only hitting 20% of your parents. So if you're just depending on one form of communication, we got to get a little bit better. You know, smoke signal if you have to, carrier pigeon, whatever we have to do to reach these parents, we have to try. Maybe it is finding out their address and dropping little boxes on their door. Don't be creepy about it. You know, maybe it is that non-contact contact that's going to be what they need. But it's just these little check-ins that we don't know how God is going to bless that. And we don't know what they're going through, that maybe that one reach out is going to make all the difference. We don't know. And the not knowing makes everything that bit heavier, that bit more of a value to it. Sorry, I've also been completely ignoring the chat. So if there's anything in there, I'll jump in, I swear.
People were just asking for the books to be sent.
If you can send me an email with your name, your core, and your address, you'll get a book.
I will throw your email into the chat so that people can do that.
Thank you. Once again, maybe don't tell anybody at Orange, but you'll get a book. They don't need to know. This is just such good information. Like we actually came out with this last year at Orange Conference, and I'm not gonna lie, I looked it over and was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I really dived into the numbers, and the numbers tell such an interesting story. Like just what parents are willing to say, what they're struggling with, what they want, what they're asking for, what they think of the church. These are just kind of ammunition for us to know so that we can do better for them in the future.
Does anybody have any other questions? If not, I can throw some questions, or if you want to throw it in the chat, then I can say it for you. Because we'd love to finish up the last couple minutes that we have with hearing what we can from Jackie.
I'm also always available, by the way. This is like a one and done. You never get to see me again. If you ever want to talk about this, feel free to send me an email and we can set up a Zoom time to chat about maybe specific instances in your church, specific communities, and we can brainstorm together. I won't say that I'm an expert in everything in ministry, but I have connections to a lot of experts. So I would be happy to connect you with people that are nearby and that are doing some really great things.
If you could give, oops, sorry, Hannah, you can go.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. You won't forget what you're going to say. Okay. I just had kind of a half thought, just going off of so many kids saying they wanted their parents to have a friend. And that just really hit me. Just a half thought here, and I love how you say it doesn't have to be more programs. We don't need to build more programs, the little things. And like my notebook for my youth program, I just have running lists of just brainstormed ideas, like little tidbits. So what just popped into my mind for that was just like playing parent matchmaker. And, we all have different setups if we're in the same church with the parents or not. But if you see two moms that look like, they might get along or anything, just, I don't know, the simple thought of just walking up and introducing them to each other just popped into my mind. Something so small, but I think we could miss that and be like, oh, I don't know how to help them make friends. Well, maybe you can. Maybe you can invite them both over for tea. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit much, and it could be just simpler. Just introduce them to each other, and you never know. Maybe that could help.
Yeah. I would definitely say with that, don't feel like you're a director, you're a facilitator. You're not directing their conversations, you're just bringing them together, and then let go and let God.
Yep.
I was just going to throw out a question. If you could give 3, I could go turn around and do this right now, 3 things to do to partner with parents, just for our people to kind of take, if there's 3 very specific, checklist things.
Yes. The first is not really doing anything, but just observe. Take time for just 5 minutes, look out in your congregation, get a little head count. Who's a parent? Who do you know the name of? Who do you not? Kind of give yourself a baseline to work off of. Because if you're really just jumping into, okay, now I really want to engage with everyone, there's a million directions you can go in. There's a million things you can do. And knowing you have so many options paralyzes most of us. Where do we start? The best thing is to gather your information. Who do you have? Look at your core roles. Who's on there? Who has not been there for 10 years and maybe should not be on core roles anymore? But give yourself an accurate representation of who you have. And then just be honest with yourself. What is your level of knowing? And it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I only know their name. That's great. That gives yourself a baseline of, I want to know more about this person. Second, look at what you're already doing and look for a next step. So if you're already doing troops, what is some way that you can connect with those parents and the troops? Is it inviting them to Sunday for when they get their sashes? Is it, we just did the cooking badge and inviting them for a dinner party? What can you do to just one extra step? Not creating a whole new thing, but you're already doing these certain programs in your core. What's one additional step that you can do? And then the next is there a hub at your core? Is there a place that parents, adults usually congregate, and make it a little bit easier? Set up coffee. Coffee and donuts bring more people together than anything in the world. Put it out there and just put those little conversation cards. Maybe put out a fun question and say, don't get too crazy with parents of that thing, but what's one crazy thing that happened in your family this week? Discuss. It might be 4 weeks of absolute silence with parents as they drink their coffee and eat their donut. Who knows, on that 5th week, maybe someone answers it. Maybe on that 6th week, more people answer it. And then you're starting conversations with one another for them to naturally build relationships. Kind of weird to get all parents in the room and say, hey, we're all parents. Let's talk about it right now. Some parents are going to be a little concerned about that. Some introverts like me will want to head for the door and be like, you guys are a bunch of weirdos. But kind of helping naturally build conversations and topics together in a natural way, in a non-threatening kind of situation where they can kind of come and go as they please, is going to be really helpful. And remember, the win is not the conversation, because you can't control if they talk. The win is providing the food and the resources and the space for them to make those connection points. If you don't see after a couple weeks that there's being any connection, maybe you kind of plant a mom that is a talker and plant them in there to try to see if you can get that conversation going. Try not to have it be you as much as possible, because a lot of times you are the pastor, and I love my pastor, but I might not be as free with my conversations until I know I could be comfortable with that conversation and with that person, and then I'll be a little bit more free. But if you're trying to just start those relationships, that might freeze a little bit. Wait until they're comfortable having talked with a few people, and then naturally slide in and be like, oh, your kid did that? Mine too. And then you're naturally in the conversation instead of, I am pastor, I'm here now to kind of be in the circle. But yeah, my first step is don't do anything. Just look at what you're already doing and give yourself a baseline.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jackie, for coming and for sharing. Once again, guys, Jackie is our Orange representative for the Salvation Army, and that is for the whole nation. And so she is very accessible to any of you guys. I've put her email in the chat there. But we're just so grateful to have heard from you, Jackie, and we look forward to potentially seeing you at the Orange Conference if any of you guys are going. But thank you so much. So thanks, everybody. Next week, we will be hearing from somebody that I have forgotten, but you'll get an email from me about the next session, and wish you guys all a great rest of your day. Bye.